today we're going to be making homemade bacon. Now this is one of those things that you have to try it to believe how amazing it is. But not only is it actually cheaper than store-bought bacon, but it tastes so much better. Let's get started. Now I want to emphasize first and foremost, when it comes to making homemade bacon, this is not a quick process. It does not happen overnight. It does not even happen within a few hours. It takes a minimum of 10 days for this process before you even get a chance to smoke it. And then when you smoke it, it's going to be totally worth it. Now you don't actually have to smoke. That is one thing I do want to emphasize. You can just do this in the oven after the curing process is complete, but either way, it's going to be delicious and it's going to be better than what you get at the store. So what you're going to need to make this homemade bacon, first and foremost, the most important ingredient of all, pork belly. Now, you might have to go to a local butcher in order to find this. I'm able to get this at Sam's Club. I believe they probably also sell it at Costco. It doesn't really matter the amount that you have. You can adjust the amount of curing materials that you need regardless of, based on the weight of the meat. So that's the first thing you need. Second thing you're going to need is salt. You don't use a ton of it, but you do need some, and it's also a very crucial ingredient. The third thing you're going to need is brown sugar. Now, if you are doing something like keto, you could probably use some of the Swerve brown sugar. That should work just fine. I've used it in recipes in the past and it's worked fine. I haven't used it on the bacon, but I'm sure it'll be perfectly fine. And then the last two things you're going to need are some black pepper, another one you don't need very much of, and this you need very, very little of. It's technically optional, but curing salt. This, you're literally using half a teaspoon for every 2 to 3 pounds. So it's very, very little, but it is an important ingredient for the curing process. And if you decide to skip on this, it'll just be uncured. You're technically taking more of a risk of there being more bacteria, but it shouldn't theoretically matter all that much. So I've only ever done it with this, but it's entirely up to you technically whether or not you want to do this. The rest of the stuff is essential. This is really helpful, but it's not 100% necessary. So let's go ahead and get into making up the cure first and foremost, and then we'll get the pork belly ready for the cure. Hi, Future Guy here. I almost forgot a very, very important thing. Get yourself some of these turkey-size oven bags. These are essential to keep your pork belly curing for the time required without having to worry about it leaking all over the place. Now back to the video. Alright, so for the cure, you're going to need, starting with half a cup of brown sugar. That is for up to 3 pounds of pork belly. Since mine is about 5 pounds, closer to 6 actually, we're going to do a full cup of brown sugar. Having a little bit extra isn't going to hurt anything. Just make sure you don't do too much more, because you will have some left over in the end, but it's not going to be necessarily something you have to worry about. So next thing you're going to need is 3 tablespoons of salt, and that's 3 tablespoons for 2 to 3 pounds. Since mine's closer to 6, I'll be doing 6 tablespoons of salt. The next thing you need is 1 1/4 teaspoons of black pepper for every 2 to 3 pounds. Since I have 6 pounds, I'm just going to treat it as, I'm just going to do an even tablespoon, which is about the equivalent of 3 teaspoons. And then lastly, you need half a teaspoon of curing salt, and that's half a teaspoon for every 2 to 3 pounds of pork belly. And since I have 6, of course, or closer to 6 rather, I'm going to do a full teaspoon, but as 2 half teaspoons. Once you get all that together, mix her up. And now that that's all mixed, let's get our pork belly prepared. All right, now with the pork belly, we're gonna wanna get it out of the packaging, obviously. And I like to get a strainer out in order to get this thing well rinsed. All right, so we have our pork belly over on the cutting board here with some paper towels. Just wanna get this thing patted as dry as we can. Now that that's sufficiently dry, I'm going to want to score a crosshatch pattern in the fat cap. This will help it so that the seasoning can get in all the little crevices, which will help season the meat that much better, so that when it comes time to actually smoke it and take it out, it will end up being extremely delicious. Alright, so now we have this all ready to go. We're going to get a big bowl to put that in and then start adding the cure. Alright, so now we have our pork belly in a nice big bowl. Take about half of the dry cure here, sprinkle it on top. Keep in mind, even though you're going to rub this in, you're likely going to have a lot of loose cure. So don't worry too much about it. It's all going to go in the bag with the pork belly. But you still want to try to get it rubbed in there as best as you can so they can get in all the crevices, all the little fat crevices to help better season it, get the meat really, really well prepared for eventually being smoked. And I know it looks like a lot. It really is a lot, and the fact is not all of it is going to stay on the meat after the fact, but this is absolutely essential to get the bacon to the right level of moisture and level of saltiness and everything else. Letting it sit for the full time with all of this cure will help immensely. And then when it's all said and done, you'll be rinsing off the cure anyway. So then you'll just have whatever is left inside of the meat itself. All right, so now that we have now that we have all the cure on, we're gonna go ahead and put that in one of those turkey-sized bags. Now we have that turkey-sized bag. These brining bags are the only thing I've found that are big enough to house one of these things without you having to worry about it leaking everywhere. Because this will produce quite a lot of liquid initially as it has time to cure, because it's basically taking out all of the excess moisture in the meat, which will make it much more firm and therefore much easier to cook and cut and to make into beautifully sliced bacon. Now, this is only going to be thick cut. It's pretty much, from my experience, very, very difficult to get it as a thin cut. But we'll go ahead and get that tied up with a twist tie. And that's going to go in the fridge for 10 days. You can do it up to 14, but I found 10 days works just fine, and typically it doesn't really make a difference in flavor. So 10 days it is. I'm going to go ahead and get that second pork belly that I also have ready to go, and then from there we'll get them in the fridge and get them started curing. Now, at the end of that 10-day cure period, this is what your pork bellies, if you did more than one, will look like. You'll have a pretty good amount of liquid, and otherwise, it'll be looking like this. You'll feel it's pretty firm compared to where it was when you started the process. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to rinse these off and get them ready to smoke. Alright, and from here, just want to get out some paper towels. Get these padded nice and dry. Now the goal here is you want to let these sit out and dry in the open air. The reason for that is that it forms a thin pellicle around the outside of the meat, and that way it absorbs the smoke much, much better. Now, theoretically, you shouldn't have to worry about that if you're cooking it in the oven, but it still is not something that's going to hurt the process, so I still recommend doing it. And you're going to be cooking this either way, so don't worry too much about extra bacteria. You're going to get this cooked down to a safe, you're going to get this cooked up to a safe temperature, and it will be completely safe to consume. Alright, and once that's patted dry, you'll just let this sit out for about 2 hours. Hi, Future Guy here. One thing I forgot to mention, which is of crucial importance, is when cooking the bacon, whether you're doing it in the smoker or in the oven, you want to do it at 250 degrees, and you want to get it cooked to an internal temperature of about 150 to 160. You can do it a little more if you want, but 150 is the minimum safe temperature for it to be consumed without having to worry about getting sick or anything. So once again, get it cooked to an internal temperature of 150 to 160. I usually aim for 160, and cook it at 250 degrees, either in the smoker or in the oven. Smoker, I like to use whatever chips I have on hand. A lot of times I'll do either hickory, maple, apple, or a blend of all three of those. This one I did the competition blend, which is a blend of hickory, maple, and apple. With all of that being said, you should be good to go. Now back to the video. Alright, so when it comes to slicing this, one of the things that I've learned makes a big difference is starting from the fattest end to cut there, because these slices are going to be thick no matter what you do. But it's a lot easier to slice this area first than trying to slice it at the end. So I'll end up slicing the flattest side after I slice the rest of it. It should be pretty self-explanatory. One thing important to keep in mind as well with this is that this is all technically cooked to the temperature that is safe to eat, but I personally wouldn't bother trying to eat anything but the very end, because that part's more cooked. Because the reality is, just like with any other bacon, you want this bacon to be cooked normally. So, cook it in a frying pan, or do it my personal favorite way, which is to put it on wire racks on a baking sheet in the oven. And then you can do a bunch of it at once. It ends up not curling up like bacon typically does, and you can get it just as crispy as you want it without having to worry too much about it getting burnt. So we'll just get the rest of this sliced up. Look at that. It's beautiful. Delicious. And now for the taste test. I tell you what, when you try this, you will not want to go back. Just the sheer depth of flavor that you get, smoking it yourself, making it homemade, it's unbelievable. The quality difference is just stellar. So I'm telling you, do it and cook it in the oven. And remember, just because it isn't authentic doesn't mean that it can't be delicious. About a week almost to get it completely done. Actually, that's not true. These are essential to be able to keep that thing curing in your fridge for 10 days without you having to worry about it. These are essential to help you keep your